Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to S.A.L.T. Live here in beautiful downtown Keene, Texas. Yeah. We're still getting used to the Texas way of life here in the Hadley household with all the fun and new rules that we're living by here in Texas and still learning lots and lots of fun, cool things. So, anyway, yes, we are in Keene, Texas. And just for fun, a while back when we were still in Nebraska and stuff, I used to do little things at the beginning just to give people a chance to, find us online. We played a little 5-minute intro and, try and share it around our different pages and groups and give people a chance to find us, and also give Aspen a chance to work out any AV kinks. How are we doing, Aspen? How are the AV kinks?
Who said there were kinks?
Aha! I'm getting a thumbs up from Aspen verbally, sort of. So we must be good. So anyway, just to kind of kick things off and give people a chance to find us while they're bopping around Facebook, I thought we would do just a fun, here are some useless but very interesting facts about the world in general that I thought you might find interesting. I know I found them enlightening, and I thought I'd share them with you. So here we go. Fun but useless facts. Semi-smarter every other day, maybe at least once a week. Here we go. Number 1. Have you ever wondered what the size of Japan actually is? I was shocked to see, if you can tell here on the map, it's like the entire eastern seaboard. I mean, I figured Japan was, it's a nation, it's its own country. I thought, it's, got to be fairly decent size. I did not realize it was that big. But yeah, look at that on the map. Stretches up from Maine all the way down, if you follow the islands, all the way down to Cuba. And that's the size of Japan. I wonder if that way down there is Okinawa, right there down by Havana. I'll have Aspen chase that down for us, and she can tell us if it's, part of Japan or not. All right. Speaking of the sizes of things, this one's, I think, a little more of a humorous than anything. Oh, no, this is Australia. Australia, I also knew was, its own kind of, semi-big country nation. I thought, wow, how big can it be? Look at that. It fits over most of America, which I think this is really enlightening for Americans, because we tend to think, oh, we're the world, and we're the best part of the world, we're the biggest part of the world. We are far from the biggest part of the world. Yeah, that is the actual size of Australia compared to us here in the U.S. Now, this next one, I'll have Aspen bring Miranda up here just for fun, because I think I chose this next one just for Miranda. So, Miranda, tell people where you used to live.
I've lived in a number of places. Alaska. I'm guessing you're asking about Alaska.
Alaska.
Yes.
Specifically,
Kodiak Island.
Kodiak Island in Alaska.
Yes.
And how do people in Alaska feel about the United States?
How do they feel about the United States? I know how I felt about the United States.
And when I was in Hawaii, we used to say that, well, how do you feel, it's so weird being not in the United States. And Hawaiians would go, you're actually in the United States.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, right.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you've certainly felt like United States citizens.
Yeah.
Though if you left Alaska and you went down to the lower 48, you were going outside.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not quite sure what you're getting at.
Well, whenever you look at a map, because Alaska's pretty small, isn't it?
No, Alaska would be the largest state.
No, that can't be true.
It is. And actually, we had a conference president up there who had just come from the Texaco
conference?
Texaco or Texas conference? The Texas conference. Yeah,
where everything's big.
Yeah, he had just come from the Texas conference. And so, he went from Alaska to Texas, I think, one way or the other. But, yeah, he said the Texas people like to brag about how big Texas was, and he said he'd pull out the map and show them, here's Texas on top of Alaska.
Yeah.
And it was pretty small.
Well, this next map I'm going to show you is for those days you lived in Alaska. And for all you Alaskans, here's what a map of the United States would look like from an Alaskan perspective. Oh, shoot. No, darn it. Where is it? Oh, there it is. So there, the United States of America from an Alaskan perspective. What it is, because Miranda can't see it. You know how in maps, they'll have the United States, and then there's tiny little Alaska and Hawaii.
Yes.
This is now, it's great big giant Alaska, and tiny little United States, the lower 48.
48, yeah.
So
yeah.
it's funny.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny, because Alaska is always this tiny little square in the bottom of the map, and it's actually the biggest state. So, anyway.
It's big and not lots of people, which has an appeal.
Yes. And actually, I've got another map in here. I'm just going to come to that. The amount of people in the world and where they live. Let's go back to that other one real quick. This is an interesting map. It's the population of bald eagles and their nests in Wisconsin in comparative. On the left, you see there, it's 1974. And all the little orange dots represents bald eagle's nest they were mapping out. And then you see in 2019, and you see it's like 100 times more. So the bald eagle nest just, really exploded. And they credit that to the Clean Water Act, so that they were almost dying out in Wisconsin anyway, the bald eagles. And then they enacted the Clean Water Act, which had a big impact all across the country. And the bald eagles just, boom, exploded. So that is good. All right. Let's go to our next one, which is Canada. Let's talk about the Canucks, those friendly neighbors to the north. I saw this once on a satellite picture. Actually, no, it was from the International Space Station. And it was all the lights at night in the lower 48 in Canada. And you see this huge bank of lights all across the border of Canada and the U.S., and almost nothing in the upper northern reaches of Canada. And this map shows you there that half of Canadians live just below that red line. So 50% of all Canada lives in those two very tiny little areas just across the U.S. border, just north of us. I thought that was interesting. I couldn't find the night picture. If you look it up, Google sometime, night pictures of Canada, you'll see all these lights right along the Canada-U.S. border, and as you move north, nothing. It's kind of interesting. Where people choose to live. So here's one about population. I thought this was interesting. So this map is showing you where the population of the world is divided up into. So like each one of those colored areas represents 10% of the world population. And if you look there in the big green area, we've got the United States, Canada, Mexico, Central America, part of South America, all of that, Alaska and everything, and it's only 10%. And as you move to the right, you'll see to the right that other part of South America, and then you're getting into North Africa, England, Scotland, Ireland, all that, and it's like that little bit, because a lot of that is ocean. But you'll see in just those little areas where there's land, that's 10% of the world population. And then you get into Central Africa and Norway, Scandinavia, and all that. And you see how thin those lines are as you move into Asia and East Asia and Eurasia. And tiny little thin lines, and that's 10% of the world's population. So imagine all the people we have here in the United States being crammed into those tiny little areas across. There are parts of the world that far more people are living, close, jammed in together, tightly. We sometimes don't know how good we have it here in America. And as you see, as it gets around Australia and them, it kind of spreads out again. So I thought that was interesting. Let's see, the next one. Do you like trains? I love trains. Miranda, do you like trains?
They're okay.
Miranda thinks they're okay. Okay, trains. We're going to take a train ride sometime.
Oh, my grandfather, actually, on my father's side of the family, was a train conductor for his career.
You never told me that.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yes.
Do you have a hat? I want a hat.
No.
What? I want a train conductor hat. A real one. You can get me that for Christmas.
Okay. Write that down, Aspen.
Write that down. Yeah, I love trains. I love trains. And when I was a kid, I wanted a big train set. And all my life, I never got one. My dad did tell me later, he said, I almost bought you one because they had this huge train set up in a toy store, in a hobby store. And he almost bought it. And he said, I was going to bring it home for Christmas or birthday something and set it up. It was beautiful. It was already built and everything. And I was, well, what happened? And he said, I don't know. I just didn't get it. Yeah, my childhood dream. Crushed on a whim. But if you want to take the absolute longest train ride, it actually is, the Trans-Siberian is usually touted as the longest train ride. This is using the Eurail system. You can actually go all the way from Portugal, way across, and you see the line there all through, you go through London and China and all the way down into southern Vietnam. And that's one continuous train that you have to, make stops along the way, and then you might have to board another train that's going the same direction. But it'll take you all the way there. 10,566 miles. So, I don't know, did they have trains in Alaska?
Yes. I think so.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That definitive
It's been a while.
report.
I mean, they wouldn't have had any trains on the island.
No, not Cody.
So, I was trying to remember driving around. Yeah, trying to remember driving around the mainland. Pretty sure there were train tracks over there. Yeah.
Yeah. Was there? You couldn't take a train to through Canada to get to the lower 48, could you? You had to drive the Trans-Canada Highway.
I don't know. I never looked into taking a train. I just drove. Yeah, or flew.
And I know, like in Colorado, they had trains because we both used to live in Colorado. And I know there was a train that came, at least from Denver, it came up through the pass and up into Glenwood's caverns and springs and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was an old steam train locomotive they used to bring up and down. It was like a tourist train. And then there was another one that took you up into the mountains of like gold towns. They would go to the different, abandoned ghost towns and gold towns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember seeing, while I was driving on the Alcan, certainly, I remember seeing some trains chugging along there. So whether they're passenger trains or just, trains, I don't know.
The train that started it for me, that got my love for trains going, is called Tweetsie Railroad. It's in North Carolina, and I must have been 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and we had a family vacation up to Boone, and that's in North Carolina. And Tweetsie Railroad was up there. It was an old 1950s locomotive, and it was a tourist train ride. They would take you around a little bit. But it was up in the mountains, and it was cool. I was 7 years old, and we got on, and that was it. My love for trains was solidified. And Tweetsie almost went under. I was reading an article about it. It almost went under, and the locals rallied and saved the railroad and fixed the tracks and got this engine all taken care of, and Tweetsie Railroad rides again. That's where Miranda comes in and says, "Yay! They saved your childhood dreams." We have to go there sometime.
It sounds like fun.
It
we
does
should
sound
have
like
done
fun.
that. Maybe we can do that next summer then.
Let's do that next summer. Go to Tweetsie Railroad. Take Aspen. See if she falls in love with trains. What do you say, Aspen? And Aspen has no opinion. All right, good.
Aspen was wearing the headphones.
Oh, Aspen was wearing headphones. All right, so hopefully people have found us by now. So we're going to get started into the real meat of the broadcast. And we're going to start off with a video, Spot of Salt. And I posted this morning because a buddy of mine posted a story that I had used in a Spot of Salt. Just for fun, I said, hey, you and I must read the same books. And I posted the video. And it turns out it actually goes really well with what we're talking about today. So here's a story and a Bible promise in American Sign Language from our series, a pinch of salt. Hi, Brett here with a pinch of salt, learning Bible promises and sign language. Bruce Larson was a pastor in New York City, and he tells of the story of a time where he was counseling a high-powered New York executive who was having a difficult time with those first initial steps of coming to Jesus, namely surrender. After a bit, he asked him to take a walk with him, and so he took him down to Rockefeller Plaza, and there at the entrance to that building is a huge statue of Atlas, the man standing and straining, holding the world on his shoulders, right? And they looked at it a few minutes, and then he invited him to cross the street, and they went into St. Patrick's Cathedral. And there, behind the high altar, there was a small statue of the boy Jesus. And in his hand, he also held the world. But instead of standing and straining like Atlas was, the boy Jesus was at peace. And it was in that moment that the New York executive understood he had a choice: to continue in life holding the weight of the world on his shoulders like Atlas, or to surrender his world to Jesus and find the peace that passes understanding that Jesus promised. And that brings us to today's text in sign language, which is Matthew 11:28. And it says, "Come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." A promise from Jesus saying, come to me, and I'm going to give you this peace that passes understanding. So here's what it looks like. Come to, I'm going to go God instead of me. Just understand that me means God there. All who are tired and burdened. That's heavy laden, burdened, right? And God will give you rest. And that's Matthew 11:28, a great promise to live by every day. So, yeah, that was fun. Fun story about if we're going to carry the world ourselves or we're going to take it to Jesus and let him carry the world for us. So today, we told you last week we were going to start talking about the churches in Revelation. So the 7 churches in Revelation, which is a great topic. I don't know if we're going to do more than just one. We'll ask Miranda that later. She's the one that plans these things. But the 7 churches in Revelation, and we're going to look specifically at the church in Laodicea. And that's the message to the church in Laodicea. And just a quick overview, the 7 churches, in fact, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 churches, these are all, there's two things to Revelation. There is a modern day application. So what does it mean to us? But there's also an application of what did it mean in the day that it was written. So the churches in Revelation are both real churches in John's day. John wrote Revelation on the island of Patmos, where he was, put there by the Romans for, jail, kind of prison kind of thing. And so there he was writing Revelation. And so there were 7 actual churches in Asia Minor at the time, and those are the ones that he's listed there. And they're also indicative of 7 time periods of prophecy. And so the 7 trumpets and the 7 seals are all the same kind of thing. They all kind of match up together. And not exactly the first seal, first church, first trumpet. They don't exactly line up, but they're close. They kind of overlap in areas. So we're looking at prophecy. And just for fun, if you want some interesting theological knowledge, there's prophecy and there's apocalyptic literature, and they are different. So like prophecy has only meaning to the future. So if there's a prophecy, it means the prophet is prophesying about future events. Apocalyptic literature actually has an application in the day that it's written and future events. And that's one of the main differences between prophecy and apocalyptic literature. Now you can impress your family and friends with all things theological and go, oh, he's so smart. So we're going to look at the city of Laodicea. And a couple of fun things about Laodicea. If Aston showed the map, you can see the 7 churches were all really kind of in a circle, which is one of the reasons that like Paul and John and they could do these evangelistic things, because they would just go down the road and travel, and they would hit these towns and they would raise up churches. And so you can see that they're all kind of in this path where they could follow and revisit them and stuff. But Laodicea is about 40 miles east of Philadelphia, one of the other churches, and about 100 miles east of Ephesus, one of the other churches that was mentioned. It was a really wealthy city. Lots of rich people there. It was known for its luxury and its prosperity. It was a banking center, so, First National Bank of the Romans, National Bank, and that kind of thing were all there in Laodicea. And they were also known for, they used to make a couple of things. They had a pharmacy center there, like they were known for making medicines, and they were also known for making these really, really nice clothes. So this was before the 80s, because they had really nice stuff back then, and that came from Laodicea. So we're going to talk about Laodicea, and it's, today, because there's ruins that still stand. You can see the ruins of Laodicea, and they're really kind of pretty if you get a chance to go over there. I know some people have been on these biblical history tours, and they take them through the different cities, and they'll show the modern city, and they'll show the ruins of the cities that they were actually talking about in the Bible. And you can see a few of the pictures that Aspen's kind of flipping through. That was what you can see today of the actual city of Laodicea that John was writing about. So I'm going to kick it over to Miranda, and she's going to start us off by reading the message to the church of Laodicea.
Okay, this is Revelation 3:15 to 21. I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot. I could wish that you were cold or hot. So then, because you are lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Because you say, I am rich, have become wealthy, and have need of nothing, and do not know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked, I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich, and white garments, that you may be clothed, that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve, that you may see. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Therefore be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I'll come into him and dine with him, and he with me. To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I also overcame and am set down with my Father in his throne. So the main part that we're looking at here tonight is Revelation 3, verse 18, which is, I advise you to buy from me gold refined by fire, so that you may become rich, white garments, so that you may clothe yourself, and the shame of your nakedness will not be revealed, and eye salve to apply to your eyes, so that you may see. So now this was the advice that Jesus gave to the people who lived in Laodicea, through John, of course.
What am I supposed to do?
Oh, Kitty, you can sit here on the edge. She left you some space.
What? What about the whole spewing out of the mouth? What about that part? I always play second fiddle to a cat. Yes, I'm talking about you. Yes.
She has to have her part. She's not helping Aspen tonight, so she's got to help you.
She's over here supporting us.
Yes.
I see. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. Where were we?
Okay, so like you had mentioned before, it's interesting to note that the Laodiceans were known for several things.
Yeah.
And that, of course, was they were the banking center,
Mm-hmm.
including a gold exchange.
Mm-hmm.
And so the gold is mentioned, and the clothes that they wore, and so the black clothing that they wore known for that. And so the text mentions white clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the location of a major medical school where an eye salve called Phrygian powder was made from a local stone. And of course, the text also mentions they needed to buy eye salve.
Right. So that was in Laodicea. One of the things they did was they had these black sheep, I guess, black and sheep. I guess they were sheep. Yeah, they must have been sheep. And they would herd these, black sheep, which weren't real common, and they're not real common today either. But they would take these black sheep, and so they actually had shepherds were not considered very nice people back in the day, and yet in Laodicea, because the sheep were so prized for what they're doing, they were like the elite shepherds. So if you were a shepherd and you wanted to make it, man, when you went to work in Laodicea, you had risen to the top level of shepherding. And they would take those and make into black wool and clothes and stuff, and that was sought out after. And the eye salve they made from these rocks. I'm not sure why a rock would be.
It really doesn't make much sense, does it? But there doesn't seem to be too much known about that, except that apparently, I think it was the powdered white rock mixed with olive oil is their guess, and people would apply that to their eye. Apparently, it was successful because it was very popular. So they know that much, but...
So if the doctor came to you, here's this rock, rub it in your eye, you'll be fine.
Powdered rock, but all the same, I can't imagine powdered rock and olive oil in my eyes.
Like it'd scratch your
fixing
retina.
too much of anything, yeah.
But the gold, the bank cents he mentioned, was also like the money exchange, because Laodicea was on that route, and it was a trade route, and people would come in from the country, and they would trade, the exchange rate and all that kind of stuff.
So, this text spoke to them things that they could understand and have
They knew, they were like, oh, this is us. Yeah, we do all these things.
Yeah. And also, as a side note, the city apparently had, they had hot springs and cold springs, but apparently they also had some, they had no actual real water source.
No, they weren't by a lake or a river or anything. Yeah, they had to pipe it in.
Yeah, from 6 miles away, apparently, they piped in tepid mineral water, and apparently was fairly nauseating and lukewarm. I think it started out hot, but by the time it got to them, it was just lukewarm. So these people knew about lukewarm water and how nauseating it was, basically, and how distasteful. Mineral water, if it's, isn't always tasteful. We used to say it, I went to Pisgah in the 80s, and we used to say, by the time the water got from the cistern to the sink, it was nasty Laodicean water, because it was rust-colored and nasty. And Florida is like that. They get, the tap water in Florida, there's so much. What's in the water in Florida? It's I don't know.
Yeah, it's sulfur. Lots of sulfur.
Oh, yeah, that's icky.
Yeah, and it's nasty. So if you're in Florida, you know what I'm talking about. I used to live in Florida as well, and like at the camp, we used to in Kalakwa, the shower sometimes would just like, you could just smell the sulfur in the water, and you had to filter it, But yeah, that's sort of the same kind of thing they were in, having to bring this water in, and even bringing it so far, because it went through the stone right away, so it picked up minerals and stuff, and it was nasty. Yeah, it was not good water.
Yeah, well, I have to admit, it was Vegas that we started drinking bottled water on a regular basis, because that was some of the worst tasting water I had ever experienced. Previous to that, we had always just drank tap water. We lived in Colorado and other places, and I wouldn't have thought to buy bottled water, but we moved to Vegas. You just couldn't drink it. It was horrible.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
Here's not great. The tap water.
Yeah, we don't drink. Nope. We hit Vegas, and we have been drinking bottled water ever since. Yeah. Okay, so point 1, the banking center, including a gold exchange, and the Bible verse that goes along with that, counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, that you may be rich. So often we hear the word Laodicea, and we don't really stop to remember that it was an actual town. It's just at least I know for myself, I just kind of go straight to, it's just another definition. Like the definition of Laodicea would be lukewarm people. Yeah. We don't really look past that.
Right.
And they're awful people that God's going to spit out because he can't stand them. Now, in real life, of course, Laodicea was probably a place that a lot of people wanted to live.
Yeah.
They were clearly very, very rich, and rich enough that when a earthquake
had a big earthquake that
hit
caused a lot of damage.
Their town and other surrounding
Huge
towns.
Earthquake.
Yeah, and pretty well wiped them out. While the other towns accepted money from the government, basically they took money from the emperor to rebuild their cities. Laodicea said, no thank you, we can rebuild on our own, and they did. Yeah. So clearly they were quite well-to-do.
They were quite well-to-do. They were very proud of their wealth and what they had there, and
And you're going to tell a story about ingathering?
Oh, yeah, because, again, we're talking about a place where most people there were wealthy, and like I said, they were so proud they didn't take that money from the government. We'll do it ourselves because we're Laodiceans, and and we're going to get to this point of that being wealthy made it really hard to see your need for anything. And we used to do ingathering again in the 70s and 80s. I don't know if they still do it today, but we had these cans. That was the only cool part about it. The only thing we looked forward to were the cans. And we tried to keep the cans, but they never let us keep the cans so we could use them as banks or something, that we would go out, and this was in North Carolina, so, not a lot of rich neighborhoods, but, we'd go around and we'd get a lot of money from just common everyday people, common everyday neighborhoods, lower to middle class neighborhoods. But anytime we went into a really wealthy neighborhood, we didn't get hardly anything.
Yeah, my oldest daughter, Randy, she used to do the literature evangelism program, selling Christian books and magazines door to door. And yeah, she too said that just regular or poorer neighborhoods were the place where they could be guaranteed to make decent money or sell a lot of stuff. But when you went to the well-to-do neighborhoods, almost nobody would buy anything.
It's difficult, and they would say this was probably back in the mid 90s. Here in America, we think about, we're going to be missionaries to the world, and all colleges, we all send missionaries to everywhere and everything, and we always think of missionaries going out and down to South America and Africa and Europe and stuff. And I think it was the mid 90s where the World Church was looking at church enrollments, and also the shrinking of churches and populations. And it was South America was starting to put together an evangelistic program to send missionaries to America, because in South America the church was growing and things were moving, evangelism was great, and in North America all the churches were stagnant or getting smaller and smaller and losing people, and the population of the churches and the Adventist church was going down and down. And so South America was going to send missionaries to North America, and it really kind of like, what? No, they were late to see it. We don't need missionaries. What are you talking about? We're supposed to send them to you, But when they kind of studied it, they were looking at it and going, well, America, comparatively to the world, is wealthy. Even our middle class would be seen as mega rich and wealthy in some parts of the world. Mm-hmm. And they're thinking that's the hardest field, is working in areas where people have money, they have wealth, and because,
yeah. And just to share a personal story with that is, when Brett was unemployed this last time, so it's when Brett got hired again finally. It was 7 months with severance pay, and at least 6 months without any severance pay. And so when Brett got hired, it was an immediate thought that, wow, phew, you're going to have regular paychecks in the bank again, and you feel safe because of that. And yet it dawned on me that, wait 1 second, it is God who takes care of us, whether we have money in the bank or we have no money in the bank. God takes care of us. Mm-hmm. It is not us really providing for ourselves. It's not. No. It is God who takes care of us, whether we have money in the bank or no money in the bank.
Absolutely.
And so this was something that the Laodiceans didn't realize. They put their safety and their hope and who their worth and who they were was all found clearly in their possessions and their how they looked on the outside.
Yeah.
Okay, and so to make an analogy to what we're talking about here, if the money / gold are the coins in the treasury of earth, so what are the coins of the treasury of heaven? Because this should be we're talking about opposites. And so we're going to take a look at Matthew 6, where Jesus talked about treasures in heaven. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth. Skipping just a little bit, but store up for yourselves treasure in heaven. And so if you go down to the end of that passage, because it takes up time to read all of it, but if you go down to the end of that passage, it says, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve both God and money. So therefore we have serving God and we have serving money. And if the treasury of this earth is serving money, then the treasury of heaven would have to be serving God. And so how do we serve God? So that's clearly Jesus was simply specific when he said we are to love God and love our fellow man. And that is how, So basically the Laodiceans were lacking in the only currency accepted in the kingdom of God, and that's love. And love for God and love for others rather than love for self.
So I want to point out here that Miranda has just completely gone against generations of Adventist theology in that right there. Did you know that?
Please explain.
So typically, the gold refined in the fire in Laodicean is generally referred to or to be interpreted as faith.
Well, yes.
Okay, well, I can see, because they go to different places where there's faith and it's, likened unto gold and everything. But what Miranda did, was the same thing people do when they say it's faith. You go to, well, what does God say about this gold? What is it? Well, you went to Matthew and you go, treasure in heaven. And it's like, okay, so now you're making an analogy straight, which I don't think many people have ever done, because, they both make sense. They both work. But what you've done is gone to, well, what does Jesus treasure? Treasure in heaven is serving God. How do you serve God? You love your neighbor. This gold refined in the fire, which is like, well, that's your faith being tested by the fire. And that works. But what you've said is it's the experiences of serving God by loving others, which can also be like going through the fire.
Yes.
Because you've talked about how fun it can be to love your neighbor all the time.
Loving your neighbor all the time is not fun, and that's why people don't want to do that. And the neighbor, the closer your neighbor gets to home, the less we want to love our neighbor. And we just talked about that in Sabbath school today, where we were in a different Sabbath school, and they wanted to have a group thing where they did stuff for other people, service-oriented stuff, a how to love your neighbor type thing,
Yeah.
And they spent the end of Sabbath school talking about it, and none of the ideas they come up with were really hitting it off. They weren't willing to commit to anything just yet. And when they got towards just a few minutes left of Sabbath school, I thought I would just throw in one easy thing, since they weren't coming up with something else. One easy thing that everyone could do. You wouldn't have to go anywhere, invest money or anything like that, So I said, how about if we just go home and live out love there? These were more younger type people, so they had kids in school and things like that, mid-30s, early 40s maybe. And so, they were still living with getting their kids out the door and making sure their kids were properly dressed or dressed how they wanted them to dress and things like that, and making sure homework is done. So let's treat our families with more kindness, more patience, more forgiveness as spouses and such, as well as children. And nobody was willing to go that route. No, there was, let's think of something else. And then Sabbath school was over and everybody went their way. But it's hard. It's harder to live out love the closer you bring it to home.
And that's what I liked about your analogy, is that, you say, if you liken that gold refined in the fire in Revelation to acts of love, that can also be seen as going through the fire of an experience, because the faith going through experience fire, well, so can this. And they both work.
If there's any place to ask for forgiveness, the most is probably at home.
Yeah.
The impatience and things like that.
Hear that, kitty?
Is
listen.
it's you're in the closest rubbing places with other people at your own home. It's a place to practice the love of God and the forgiveness of God. The easiest, closest place to do it, and we don't have to leave home to do it. So, anyways,
that's a whole other topic.
Yes,
because you could talk a lot about how easy it is to treat the people close to us worse than the people who we barely know. We generally treat strangers and other people way better than our family.
But that's looking good on the outside, which we're going to talk about next in just a moment. But so it also says, buy from me not just gold, but gold refined in the fire. Okay, so basically Domitian was the emperor at that point in time, and he was the first emperor to declare that he was a god while he was still living. Usually the emperors had been declared a god after they died. And so then they were worshipped after that, but not before while they were still living. But now he declared that he was a god before he died, and so therefore he required worship while he was still living. And so this applied to everyone except the Jews, because it didn't apply to them anyways. And since
I happen to know that. And why?
Okay, why? It's just that explain everything.
I know,
but go ahead.
Everything. I did a paper on this very thing in college. I'm smart sometimes. Actually, he did it because at the time he didn't want to stir up the Jews and stir up the because then it would be unrest and war and everything, and he was trying to keep things, okay. Going to do it for Romans, but we wouldn't even like the Jews, so I don't even want them. But a lot of it was to keep them from, he knew they would rebel against that and would cause an uprising. And so initially he started like, nope, I don't want to cause a lot of uprising, so we're going to exempt them from it.
Right, and since to start out with, most of the Christians were Jews, they kind of fell under that same thing. And
because actually Roman at the time didn't understand the difference between the two. They didn't understand Jews, and now there's Jews and Christians. Okay, they're all just the same thing. And they didn't really care to, want to, or take the time to understand the difference. So initially, it applied to both of them.
Right, but eventually, when Romans started becoming Christians.
And that's
now
when
this was a concern.
Yeah. They were like, no, Romans can't be Christians.
Yeah, and so that's when basically they said, well, you either worship Domitian, or you can't buy or sell.
Right, because that was the main way to stay alive.
Yes, and that would be very, very hard to do if you're one of the elite and rich and respected.
Do you want to lose everything?
Yeah, do you want to really, honestly, just walk away from all that and not know where your next meal is coming from, and potentially be, I don't know, thrown to the lions or whatever. I mean. So anyways, that was, you were going to tell the story about Pompeii and Mount Vesuvius here?
Just that, you get into, like, you look at Pompeii, why, if you don't know, this Mount Vesuvius way back, in these times, blew up, it was a volcano, it erupted, and it was so fast and so furious, it covered the entire town of Pompeii, and people were, they found them, covered in the ash when they unburied them, unearthed them. They found people just in the middle of doing something. So they were either, running away, and yet it was such a, fast, tragic, chaotic event that, they were kind of frozen in time kind of thing. And yet it wasn't without warning. They knew the mountain was, rumbling. The volcano was giving signs and signals, that, eruption is imminent, and they wouldn't leave. And they just would, they weren't going to leave, because Pompeii at the time was really nice. It was an artist, an artesian kind of place, and they had wealth, they had nice things, and it was an island, obviously, and people didn't want to leave. And no, it'll be fine. The mountain takes care of us. The mountain is our god. Ooh, hail Vesuvius, and then.
Yeah, and so they didn't want to leave, and in the end, they traded in their life for death because and they stayed, and so they died. And that's, we can compare that to being gold refined by the fire. I mean, you've got people like, Daniel, who chose to be thrown in the lion's den. He knew if he prayed there in the window that's what would happen. The Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego choosing the fire over their future life, and so that's gold refined in the fire. And you've got that versus staying and not being able to give it up, like the Pompeians, and then dying because of that. And so much like the Laodiceans, everybody wants to be good enough. Good enough, we'll look good on the outside. We want to be good enough, we're doing some good things and such. But nobody really wants to give all. And there is a difference. There is a difference between talking a good talk, but not walking the good walk. So point number 2, this is where they had the textile center with glossy black wool that they grew on their own, basically, produced there, and the garments that were prized in the Roman world. And so they were black, and Jesus makes a contrast with that in this text and passage and says they were to buy white garments from him, that they may be clothed, that the shame of their nakedness may not be revealed.
So he was actually opposite. They were they were known for this, material they produced. Black material would not have been real easy because you'd had to have the black sheep, again, who were not, prominent herds of black sheep to choose from. And yet they had it, and they were very fine linen that they would make, and it was black. And then here, Jesus saying, "You're going to buy from me white linen."
White, yeah. I mean, but think about it. I mean, how many white sheep there are out there compared to the black sheep? So while certainly a minority of black sheep, it was much smaller.
Yeah.
So they were pretty. If you had black clothing, that was it.
Yeah.
Anybody could wear white.
Yeah.
So, anyways, they were quite proud of their black clothing. And we will say that the black clothing can be compared to self-righteousness, because we generally wear our self-righteousness with pride. And just think about it. After all, we say things like, "Oh, thank goodness we aren't like them." That is wearing our self-righteousness with pride. So you're going to make a reference to the 80s clothes.
I am?
That's what it says.
Oh. So in the 80s, we really had clothes to be proud of. At least we thought we did. Yeah, the 80s was a very interesting time for fashion and hair. And yet, I remember stuff I wore, and, it was... And I was a teenager too, I guess. But, you go back and think about it, it's like we went shopping in places like the Merry-Go-Round and these other stores that I don't think any of them are around anymore. Spencer's is still around, but these other places. And, it was, you were getting the latest or whatever was the coolest thing out. And in the 80s, it was usually whatever is the wildest thing out. Just for fun, we had, I was showing Aspen some music videos from the 80s, and I said, "Oh, this is the one that started it all," and I showed her Michael Jackson Thriller and Michael Jackson Beat It, and that's of course where he had those jackets on, the 2 different jackets, and those jackets, she was asking me, "Did you get one of those?" Like, no, and I didn't, because everybody had to have one, and I thought they looked stupid, but everything looked stupid in the 80s, but everyone had to have one of those, and I was, one of those, I'm not going to get what everybody else gets, and but I had equally embarrassing things that, looking back now, they're embarrassing. At the time, man, they were awesome. They were cool. And I remember thinking, I'm going to go ahead and spend the money on this because I'm going to be all that, And then when you wear it, you wanted people to look at you. I think everybody in the 80s was kind of like that, because we did those things so people would notice us, our big hair and our strange coats and ties and wearing one glove.
Okay, so if the black clothing is going to represent self-righteousness, then what is what is the white raiment that they are to buy with the gold bought from God? So if you got self-righteousness, and then the opposite of that, of course, would be living for God with humility. Because self-righteousness, you're living for yourself. You are better than, and have more, and know more, and all this kind of stuff than someone else, and you're really thankful about that. You aren't like them over there. So the opposite of that would be humility.
What's the opposite of 80s? She loves it when I put her on the spot like this.
Actually, Brett did not get rid of his 80s clothing until Aspen was 6 or 7.
The real point, though, is that they are gone. That's what's really important.
In 2012.
In this whole talk right here.
In 2012 or 2013, Brett got rid of his 80s clothing.
Are gone. Although I wish I had kept the jacket now and the one tie because Aspen wanted to see him.
I don't remember you. All I helped him get rid of was his 2 short shorts.
Short, yeah.
I mean,
shorts. And stuff.
You know, when I opened that box and I saw that, it was just full of the 80s shorts.
You didn't see it, but the picture that Aspen showed was I was wearing one of those pair of shorts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But, again, traditional Adventism says that the white raiment was representative of Jesus' righteousness, so that it covers, it covers our sin, and so that the white raiment is, Jesus offering his righteousness in place of our black cloth, our own righteousness. But where I still believe both work, the thing I like about what you're doing with it is that you're more applying it in a practical way of like, well, what does that look like? And so, you're talking about the goal being, treasure in heaven. What's treasure in heaven? Doing for others, loving others, What is, the black? Well, that's our sinful nature. That's our righteousness, which is dirty, sinful. So therefore, what is the white ribbon? It must be
Christ's righteousness covering us.
Yes. And you're saying it's a little more practical. It's this is what this looks like.
Right. And so also Jesus is pointing out here that they have absolutely nothing with which to buy the gold refined in the fire or the white raiment. They have nothing that they can even buy that with.
Right.
Jesus is pointing out that all of their beautiful clothes, all of their being good enough, is nothing but being wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked.
Right.
And so self-righteous pride keeps us from living, living with faith in self and things. That's what our self-righteous pride does. We believe that we can take care of ourselves, and we believe that money in the bank is going to keep us safe, when in reality it does nothing of the sort.
Right. And that Rice is humility. He comes out as humility. You're saying of being humble.
Humility keeps us accepting the absolutely undeserved righteousness of Christ.
Right.
And if you look at it at a little different angle, Paul in Philippians 3:7 says, "But whatever were gains to me, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ." Because they wore the black clothes with pride. But because of that, they were without. They were without the white raiment that Jesus wanted to give them. And so that's big.
Yeah.
That's like being the Pompeians who lost their lives because they wouldn't leave that behind.
Yeah. And then, so that's the gold running around, that's the white raiment. And then, of course, the last one was the rock powder that you rub in your eyes.
Yes. So they were famous for their eye salve. And yet, Jesus says, anoint your eyes with eye salve that you may see. And so what was it that they needed to see, right? They needed to see the truth.
Yeah.
Because if you go back up to the previous verse, you will see that Jesus said that they were wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. They couldn't see that truth because they were living the good life.
Mm-hmm.
They had money, they had clothes, they had friends, they had influence, they had power, and such like that. What could they need?
Mm-hmm.
They were probably involved in church. They gave money to the poor and built this or that for the church or whatever that needed to be done, and help leadership and all that kind of stuff, making decisions on the board and such. And they couldn't see
Right.
how miserable and blind that they really were.
Yep. It's true.
So they couldn't see the truth, and so they needed to buy that eye salve. And so
You can almost say the eyes have opened it up, and it would give them new perspective. They would see truth. They would see new perspective, which, not to be tongue-in-cheek, but back to the 80s, how many of us now look back and go, what was I thinking? That's perspective. In the moment in time, we're looking like, no, we're cool. We're all that in a bag of chips, and like with the ripped parachute pants, if you ever had those, you should be ashamed. I had a pair. And the ties, and those leopard skin jackets and stuff. And, at the time, we're like, oh, we're cool, we're that, And yet we look back and go, oh my gosh, how did I not see this, And it's perspective. We see better. And that's what the eye salve was giving us, truth,
Yes, the truth. And which we can't even see without that. And once again, we cannot get that outside of Jesus giving it to us.
And that's a good comparison, because think about so use your own eye salve. I'm going to rub rock in my eyes. Yeah, that'll be good. Versus Jesus saying, I think you should put that down and get eye salve from me,
Yeah. The ability to see the truth. Because without the ability to see the truth, we are continuing to live out a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not a good place to be.
But how many people would rather rub the rock in their eye
Goodness.
of seeing the truth?
Too many. And I actually had a friend tell me once that occasionally they would say something and then recognize that was a lie, and yet they couldn't go back. They would sit there and argue the point, and I would know because she would do that to me. She'd make a blanket statement and I would counter it, and she couldn't let go. She could not let go, even though she would say a lot of times there were times in her, when she would recognize that she had misspoke or said something that wasn't right, and yet she couldn't back off from that. And so if it happened to her, it happens to other people as well. And this can't be a fun place to be. To be living a lie.
Yeah. That's when just a second here, I'm going to reach down and get some rock so I can rub it in my eye.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing here.
And when you're living that kind of lie, it says you're okay.
Yeah.
Pride takes you on this journey that says you're okay. Just keep doing this, keep doing that. You're good. And then you get right to the precipice of death. Oh, he pulls that lie away. Now you can see you're right in front of death, but he pushes you right over. There's no, I'm sorry for that. It was intentional.
Yeah.
Pride just intentionally led you to your death. And it seemed so awesome till it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to look at the things we hold, things we've said, things we believe, and go, is this really true? And be able to let things go when it's pointed out, or you can come to an understanding of, no, I was wrong. And that's the humility part, being able to say I was wrong.
Yeah, and the part of that being in a loving relationship is the ability to be able to say that as well.
Yep.
So anyways, this is why Jesus said, or would rather we were hot or cold, because in both of those places we can see the truth, or at least some of the truth. Enough of the truth that if we're cold, at least we have a recognition of we're missing something. We don't know what exactly maybe, but we know that we're missing something. If we're self-righteous, we don't think we're missing too much of anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are doing okay, and we are fine with that.
Yeah.
So anyways, self-righteousness leaves us blind to recognizing that we're missing anything.
Yeah.
So the city had no nearby water source, so the tepid mineral filled and nauseating water was piped in from 6 miles away. So blind to the fact that they were like the nasty lukewarm water. You know, there was that, they knew what it was. Icky. They didn't want to have anything to do with that either, compared to the hot springs or the cold springs. But they didn't realize that while they wouldn't have drank from that lukewarm water that was all nasty tasting, that they were busy filling their hearts with that disgusting lukewarm water. So to wrap it up, Jesus doesn't leave us there in that place of, you wicked, wicked people, you know, because that's basically what we've talked about so far. In a way, it sounds like, oh, these lukewarm people, they're horrible. And he's calling them out. And we say, they deserve it. Being blind, obviously, to the fact that he is speaking to us.
All of us.
All of us, and not those people over there.
Yeah.
And he ends the passage by saying, therefore be zealous and repent. Repentance being turning away from being a wicked, wicked person. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and dine with him and he with me. And that is what Jesus does. Everything he talks about here is relationship. All of that stuff that he's talking about here, and it sounds like, oh, you wicked, wicked person. It's not. He is calling people to relationship. So it is about him giving because they are too poor to buy. We are too poor to buy the gold tried in the fire. And he is faithful to us when we go through the fires. He is faithful to us. He is giving to us in that relationship. The white raiment, he covers us with his righteousness. And the eye salve, he reveals the truth to us. And the greatest truth of all is that he just wants to come in and eat with us. He wants to have a relationship with us. I mean, really, when you think about family relationships and family get-togethers and stuff, and church things and socials and whatnot, they almost always revolve around food. You know, you have a birthday party for someone's birthday, or you at least go out to eat for someone's birthday, or any holidays get celebrated by a barbecue, or a fixing of the Thanksgiving Christmas meal and such like that. It's amazing, really, how many relationship things revolve around food. And so Jesus, he also makes this something that we can understand and say, hey, I just want to come in, I want to have a meal with you, it'll be fun. A great relationship with that.
I guess especially here in Texas, it would be a barbecue.
Yes.
Bulls down the door or not. Let me in. Let's have some brisket.
There you go.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, it's also interesting is Laodicean is the one church that doesn't get a compliment. All the other churches, you know, the message is, oh, and you have this, and I admire you for this, and I credit you this, but I hold this against you. Laodicean's the only one that doesn't have a compliment.
Yeah, but when all they're wearing is self-righteousness, he can't call them beautiful.
And I think it's since it's the last church, there's a desperation of, I can't sugarcoat this, we're down to the wire here. You need to get this gold, you need to get this cream, and you need to get this eye salve. And
he says it in love.
Yeah.
Because he's got it all there as a gift to do for them.
Yeah.
It has, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. Are we doing other churches, or what do we got next week?
I hadn't thought about that, but it sounds like fun. Maybe we will move on to another church.
Do the 7 churches, do some Revelation stuff.
Yeah, Revelation could be fun.
Yeah. Cool.
Look at it maybe from a slightly different perspective.
Yeah.
It'll be fun. We haven't done any prophecy yet, but I have been interested in looking at that and how we can relate the prophecies to our love relationship with God and such, because that's what it all boils down to.
So you never know. We might do that. Go into some Daniel, Revelation, prophecy, and see how it fits in with, because it does. Everyday living. That's it.
Everyday living with the white raiment of God and the gold, and
the barbecue. We got to remember the barbecue.
And the barbecue, yes.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. This has been fun. And like I said, next week we'll maybe get into some more, do some of the other churches and do some Revelation. And hope you had a great Sabbath. And